Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. This is the last JTF marketing webinar of the year, so we actually thought we'd do something a little different today and run more of a Q&A session, which is actually proven to be really popular. So we hope we've got some great tips and advice for you today. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Tracy Thompson. I'm new to the team as Head of Marketing, and I'm going to hand over to James Fletcher now, our CEO, to introduce himself and the rest of the team, and then we'll kick off with some questions.
Brilliant. Thanks, Tracy. So yeah, thanks for joining us. I know you guys are busy and everybody is busy up towards the end of the year, trying to push through as many things as we can. But on our panel today, we've got Adam, who's one of our certified architects here at JTF Marketing. We've got Andy, who's one of our certified experts, and Henry, who's one of our certified professionals. So they're on hand to answer all of the questions that you guys have submitted. And there's been quite a lot of questions of lots of different areas, and we'll try and cover as much as we can. And I know, as Tracy mentions, there is lots of feedback from you guys in terms of what you want to know, what you would like to know, and even some people just listening in to find out a little bit more about what's going on, what's happening, what's the tips and tricks that I should know. So these clever people on the call who work with Marketo on a daily basis will be able to share some of their experiences with you as we tackle some of your questions. Now, as a very quick introduction to JTF Marketing, if you've never dealt with us before or you're new to us, then we are a specialist marketing automation consultancy. We really perform well when we're talking about Marketo, which is what we specialize in and the only platform we really care about. But there's many others that we interact with, of course. And you'll see some logos on the screen. Maybe your company is on the screen already. And we work through various industries who use Marketo and the day-to-day marketing automation capabilities. And we basically group our services into three different pillars: consultancy services, software, and training, but everything related to Marketo. So any challenges that you've got when it comes to marketing automation, when it comes to Marketo as a platform, we've probably seen it before, and we've probably dealt with it and got a solution that we're able to roll out for you. So some of the big challenges that we often come across is a lot of people use Marketo or just a segment of Marketo, and our challenge is always getting you to maximize that platform and get a return on your investment. So I'm going to pass back to Tracy, who's going to start grilling us with some questions, which hopefully you'll find any answers. As I said, anything that you haven't already submitted or anything that springs to mind, feel free to throw it into the Q&A panel, which should be at the bottom of your screen, and we'll do our best to get through as many as we can.
Our first question today was from Maggie, and it's around Marketo reporting and bot activity. Specifically, how do you get around bots in your Marketo reports? Adam, I'm going to hand this one to you.
So in August, actually earlier this year, Marketo actually released a new feature which allows you to filter on bot activity. So not only does it allow you to filter out bot activity in your engagement reporting, you can actually see running numbers in your admin panel. It measures using different methodologies. Some worth mentioning includes what's known as IAB, which is Interactive Advertising Bureau Bot Lists. So this allows you to filter on anything within the unique IP and user agent address list that Marketo keeps and is constantly updated in the background. It also allows you to measure on proximity patterns. So this is essentially when we are measuring two activities that happen at the same time, which are normally within under a second. So some of these activities include where the lead ID is the same, where the email asset is also the same, where there's a link click or email open, or if the time difference is the same, which is normally less than 1 second. So I'm going to share my screen. And so in Marketo, it's actually quite an easy feature to enable. And so all you need to do is if you go to the admin panel and you then navigate to email, and then you see here on the top three tabs, you've got bot activity. And you'll then be presented with this screen here, as you see at the moment. So you can measure on two and enable the feature for these two activities here. So the first one is IAB list, which I mentioned earlier on. And you have two options. One is to log bot activity and one is to filter bot activity. If you choose to log bot activity, it means that all bot activities that take place after every email send will then be passed into the activity log of every individual. If you choose to filter out bot activity, it will then enable you to then discount that from any engagement reporting. And then you can also do the same for proximity pattern as well. You don't need to enable both of them, but we would actually recommend that you do both and you also filter on bot activity specifically.
Great, thanks Adam. Right, next question is from Russell, and he wants to know if you have any tips for improving the deliverability of emails. Andy, I'll pass this to you.
So if you have any issues with, or you're spotting any statistics in your emails that would suggest you're not getting into people's inbox, that are going into spam, but the first thing I'd recommend checking is that your email domain is authenticated in Marketo. So if Adam could go to share his screen and show you where we can find this in the admin section, but essentially you ask your IT team to create an SPF and DKIM record, and then you configure that in your Marketo instance. So this is usually done when you first launch an instance, but it's always worth checking if you ever have concerns over deliverability. And then another thing you could do is check that all the links in your emails all the tracking links are branded to you, and that they're set up for the domains you've authenticated in your instance. Then another thing to do is review your email template code and email template for quality. So in terms of looking at the content you're writing and using, then avoid using kind of copy that might be caught in spam filters, like classic things like free, words like free and big sale and things like that might be caught in spam filters. Next thing you could do is make sure that you're compliant with regulations. So this is having an opt-in, opt-out process in place, so that people, if you've got that in place and that's working as expected, people are less likely to mark your emails as spam. So you can also implement things like preference centers and stuff to really so people can opt in and out for specific messages they want from you. And then a final tip would be to run seed tests with some deliverability tools. So there's lots of different deliverability tools out there that you can use. Some of these integrate with Marketo, so you can actually automate the whole process. So when new records enter your database, you can ping the email address to the deliverability tool, and it will tell you if the email address is valid. You can automate all that, or you can upload lists and stuff to those tools, and they'll tell you if things are invalid. And then that also keeps your database clean.
Thanks a lot. Right, and on the same topic of emails, Terry wants to know how to troubleshoot Outlook issues, which I know comes up a lot. So Henry, I'm going to pass the great Outlook question to you.
This is a very interesting question regarding the developing templates, and we have a lot of experience in this. So we can say the first of all, relationship between Outlook and Marketo is a disaster always, and we always have facing these kind of problems, like why appear the lines and why there are like fonts that are not supporting. So what we do in general is, of course, advise before the customers in regarding all these kind of issues that happen very often. But at the same time, we have like some tips that we find out during the creating templates, so that we using, to reduce the amounts of problems with Outlook. For example, in general, custom fonts are not supported by Outlook. This is a more common problem that we have. So what we do in general, so we use like safe fonts, for example, Arial Helvetica, that for sure we want to have major problems when the template is developed. Or for example, for the dark mode is also a very huge problem. But for this, for example, we are still working on it because there are not too much solutions to troubleshooting this specific problem. And then another thing that they happen always is, for example, that Outlook hates round shapes. So it only supports the square ones. So even if we try to reflect the branding and the render is not like working, it's because Outlook doesn't like it. So we have any tips that we in general use For example, we use rounded images instead to have like the CTA, like a normal one, let's say, in all the templates. So sometimes it works, sometimes doesn't, but because there are a lot of requests that we maybe wanted to develop in the same module, so Outlook depends of if he likes or not, he will accept it or not. So let's say that is a challenge still that Outlook, challenging find out a solution for all these kind of problems.
Next question is from Cole. We also get asked this a lot as well. He says, do I need to be an expert in HTML code to be an expert in making new email templates? And would a HTML course help me use Marketo in a better way? James, I'll pass that to you.
Sure, I always get the training questions for some reason. It's quite interesting actually, because when it comes to Marketo and marketing automation in general, we have this belief that we need some level of coding skills, and that's only necessary when your templates, your master templates within Marketo, have not been coded correctly in the first place. So some of the challenges that Henry's already spoken to, and even Andy, from an email and deliverability perspective, can be overcome through good quality templates. So do you need a course in HTML? Probably not, if you've got great master templates in place. And we can happily review your templates and give you our opinion of where you are with them. We often pick up a lot of templates that have been hacked away at over time to try and get them to work in those scenarios where the Outlook buttons are not rounding and the lines are appearing and forwards and all sorts of problems. And we can give you a view of whether it's something that's fixable or whether it's better to start again. Sometimes with code, it is much better to start again because then you've got a good base quality. You've also know that it's been tested and that it's working across multiple browser sets. So when we talk about deliverability, when we talk about enhancements to overall, email performance, because not only is good HTML and good deliverability and good responsive design within various clients important to getting your email into the inbox, but it's important for engagement too, right? Let's not forget we're sending to people, not bots. As Adam rightly says, we want to filter those out and make sure that the results are correct. So I think, the course isn't necessary. Will it help you use Marketo better? There are some pretty advanced capabilities in Marketo. If you want to get into velocity scripting, if you want to get into some more advanced coding or logic in emails themselves, again, it might help you, but it's not just HTML. You'd need to know CSS. You would also need to know velocity script, which is Java based. So as the average user, I say probably it's not going to help you, but get some good templates in. Make sure that they are working and they're doing as you need them to. And they have the flexibility, right? So often, again, this is one of the challenges we see with a lot of Marketo instances that we get involved with. Clients have templates that have been built up over time, a little bit more hacked on, a little bit more hacked on, and not necessarily built in mind with, we will have all these possibilities or different modules or different types of emails that we want to create. Therefore, let's build those out in advance and then get them tested and make sure that they're up to date. And actually, this is quite interesting. Dark mode, obviously being fairly new, as Henry says, is problematic because not all email clients support it as well as, let's say, a Google or some of those other platforms. So again, making sure that you've tested for those, you've got your brand even ready for dark mode, which is one of the biggest challenges. What color does your font change to? If it's a gray, does it go white? Does it go, light blue? What are the colors? So again, thinking about brand as well is pretty important when it comes to templates. I will stop waffling now.
Next question is from Heather. I think this is a great question. What do you think is the most underutilized feature of Marketo? James, I'm going to throw that back to you.
See, I told you I always get the trainee ones, the ones about how do we get more. I think my favorite feature is maybe not, it is the most underutilized feature in Marketo, and it kind of ties into multiple areas, and that is revenue cycle modeler. So revenue cycle modeler is a visualization or a real-time live vision of your customer journey of where is your data, where does it sit in each part of your buying cycle. And I say that this is the most underutilized feature because most people don't know that it exists. They don't know the value that it can bring to their business. Now, when we talk about the performance and the results of marketing, the biggest challenge is always how do we make sure that everything we're doing is working towards the common goal: more leads, more revenue, and marketing attributed success. Because at the end of the day, we're marketers. We're trying to get our name stamped on every deal that we've engaged with and that we've encouraged through the pipeline. So revenue models will allow you the visualization of that customer journey, the conversion rate through every stage, and then also, let's say, a balance of each one of those stages. So I've got 10,000 MQLs and I need to generate more sales qualified conversations. What content am I going to focus to those individuals in order to convert them to the next stage? So you're very much focused on that revenue process rather than let's fire out another campaign and hope that people register for this wonderful webinar or click on the link and download whatever we want. What are we trying to do? How are we trying to progress them through that journey? Now, this is often a bit of a challenge for a lot of marketers because we're not often that involved in the sales process or the business conversation in terms of what is the challenges in selling. But this is what it will help us identify. And I would say it ties into other areas because if we use Marketo to report in that way, we can actually also start to report on the performance of content at different stages. We can improve personalization, we can improve segmentation, lead scoring becomes more relevant. So everything starts to layer up in terms of the complexity of how we use marketing automation, but also will help us make sure that we're efficient in the way that we build our campaigns and execute them as well.
Thanks, James. Right, next question. So we had a lot of questions actually around Salesforce and CRM systems and integration, etc. And this one specifically about migrating to a new instance. So Manon asks, what would be the top 5 things to think about and do when you move to a new Marketo instance? For example, if you were moving from one CRM system to another and you needed a new Marketo instance for it. Andy, over to you.
Sure. Okay. So the first thing you could start thinking about is data hygiene and quality. So what's good about doing a migration is you can focus on this kind of stuff where you're thinking about how clean your database is and what you could do to improve that before you migrate your data over. So think about things like duplicates, inactive records, or data that you don't really need anymore. And those are good things to start thinking about first. Then I guess something else to think about is what I was talking about earlier. You could do an email validation run where you could run all your email addresses through a tool and see how many are actually valid and how much you might actually need and how much you can get rid of. Then after those 2 things, you can start to think about, okay, so what's the volume of records I need to migrate into this new system, and to kind of consider how long that might take. There are limits on how much data you can export out of Marketo in one go. So those are big considerations if you've got a large database on your timeline of how long it might take you to migrate all of those person records. And then a fourth thing would be to think about your fields and your field mapping. You could use this as a chance to review all the fields and how much you use them, whether they're used in Salesforce or whether they're used or in your CRM or whether they're used in Marketo only. So you could look through all of your fields and see, okay, we use this one, this one we don't use these. And again, that will really limit the amount of data you're extracting out and the kind of timeline in terms of running a project like this. And a final thing I'd think about, which also links to fields, is sync or data rule dependencies. So thinking about what fields you use to set up things like custom sync rules in your CRM and things like that, and then what fields are used for Marketo only, and what fields you will need to sync to, in this case, Salesforce, when you migrate over. There's probably a lot more to think about as well. So those are the kind of the five sort of start areas, but there's a lot more to think about when it comes to migration.
It's a big job.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Next question is from Chloe, and it's about forms. And she wants to know how you add a question or free text field on a Marketo form, and is the form then placed onto your website? Henry, I'll pass this to you.
This is very, very simple, Chloe, and I will show you directly here. Sure. Okay, so before I'll go have a step back. In general, with this kind of programs, because we have a webinar program which is a template for us. So what we do is to use an embedded code of the form in our website. Okay, so to this specific action that is to a space where you can leave the questions as you did in this case, we first of all, we needed to create a field that will allow us to have this text box, okay? And then when we are creating the form, you have just to add it automatically using this icon and add the new field. Of course, I'll find it out how do you name it before. So in our case, it's talk about, and then you decide also the parameters of the field. In this way, you automatically will have it directly everywhere that you are using. In our case, for example, this is a global form. So we are using like in a different kind of programs. And in this case, in general, we will use for the webinars. But that is all the magic for this action.
Great, thanks, Henry. And I think we've got time for one more, which is from Bart. And he asks, is there a way to create a data feed for mail recipients directly from Salesforce? So when a new record is added to a Salesforce campaign, these records will automatically get added to the Marketo campaign. Adam, I think it's time for you.
Over to me, I'm muted, so we're ready to go. So the easy answer is yes, it's very simple, and I'll give you a little bit of a demonstration on how easy it is to reference data from your Salesforce campaigns. So I'll share my screen again. So one I prepared earlier on. So within your smart lists, once you've added the person records into your Salesforce campaign, what you can do is use a trigger filter, which is called added to SFDC campaign. And within the actual filter, it allows you to then reference the campaign that you want to sync across. So you can use a drop down and look for it and select it. Or if there's a multiple that you want to reference, you can then use the plus icon here and search them in the drop down, and then so forth, add them in as many as you want as well. What you can also do is by adding constraint is also reference a specific status. So depending on the setup of your campaign in Salesforce, you might have specific status values and you might want to only add in specific people. So for example, if you had a webinar campaign and you wanted to sync across only those who had a status of invited from X campaign, you would then reference the status by selecting the constraint here. And then, just like before, you can use the drop down and select the relevant status value that you want. And there is also another feature you can use with reference to campaigns, is if it's a static campaign that you want to reference rather than as and when somebody is added to a campaign, you can type in member of SFDC. And you also have this one, which is essentially the same, but you're referencing it in normal time or previous history rather than in real time when persons are added in. If you go into the full section, and what you can also then do is carry out the activities that you intend to do by sourcing the data that you want from your campaign. So in this example, an obvious choice would be to send the email if, for example, it was part of a webinar invitation campaign. But what you also have in terms of full options, which are related to your Salesforce campaign, is you might then want to update the Salesforce campaign. So you can reference that by using the drop down here and selecting the value that you want. And then if you want to update the status, you can then update the status by selecting the relevant one. So for example, if, for example, you want to measure when somebody has clicked, you might then want to change the status by engaged, and you can obviously measure that by adding the choice and the conditions. One key tip that I would definitely recommend is that you try, depending on the volume of persons you want to migrate into your Marketo campaign, just try and do it the day before. Depending on the sync speeds between the two platforms, sometimes it can take a while, and trying to do it the hour before you're due to send it doesn't always work out very well. So definitely that is my key tip in that respect.
Cool, thank you. I've learned something new there. So we have a couple of minutes left. I think we could go with the last question, actually, which I think we all think about sometimes from time to time. So Mary's question is it just me, or is Marketo not at all that intuitive? James, do you want to finish off on that point?
I mean, I have a biased opinion. I've been using Marketo for 14 years now, and it is definitely a clunky user interface, right? Everybody struggles with it when you're new to the platform, to learn enough about how to maximize it can be a real challenge. I think there's some simplicity behind the complexity, however, because actually all the screens are quite straightforward. You're always saying, what do I want? Who do I want to target? What do I want to do to them? And then when do I want it to happen? So it's quite easy when you think about it in that logic. There is a lot of power behind what Marketo can do when you understand the complexities of joining up each one of those smart campaigns, the different lists, the different triggers and requests that you can connect stuff together. So you can get into some pretty complex structures. When we start talking engagement programs, when we start talking revenue models, when we start talking lead life cycle, that's when things start to get a bit more complicated. I always recommend, if you're trying to understand what you want back out of Marketo, talk to someone like these guys on the call who sit and do this day in, day out, understanding what is it that you're trying to achieve and translating that into marketing tech or into Marketo language even. Not just marketing tech, right? So, because I think that's the biggest gap between, I'm trying to achieve this, how can I go about it? What is the right way to approach it? And sometimes that can be a bit of a challenge, just getting it clear in your head. And I have this phrase that I will use time and time again, which is draw it out before you build it out, which is always the best thing to do. Scribble it on a piece of paper, keep thinking about it. Don't touch Marketo till you've got that clear, you've thought the logic through, because it's the piece that will save you time. It's very easy to jump into the tech and start building stuff and then go, oh, that doesn't do what I want it to do. But actually, if you draw it out and go, what is the logical steps that I want to happen? It's then easier to break that up and go, right, okay, this part is a smart campaign. That piece is a smart list that I need to build. Or this can be built as a program and I'll use progression statuses in order to manage that. So there's lots of different ways to skin a cat, as they say, which is probably not meant to be said these days, but ultimately think about it before you go and build is always my advice.
Okay, so we've actually run out of time and we're going over, and we're very aware that there are a lot of questions that were sent in, and we've only really scratched the surface. So we've decided to hold another Q&A session. And this will be on Thursday, the 19th of January, after all the Christmas mayhem is over. So please save the date. We will be sending out an email over the next couple of days, and there will also be the opportunity to book your place on that webinar. And if we haven't managed to get to your question today, you can either drop us a line if it's quite specific, and I'm sure one of us will get back to you, or yes, please come and join us again on the 19th of January, and we'll go through some more of your questions with some great answers. Thank you today for you all coming and listening to us, and thanks to the team for your great advice. Look forward to seeing you all on a webinar very soon.